Deep beneath the deserts of Nevada, in a highly classified military research facility, a team of the nation's top scientists and engineers toiled away on some of the most cutting-edge technological breakthroughs the world had ever seen. At the heart of this clandestine operation was Dr. Emily Sinclair, a brilliant young quantum physicist whose work was about to change the face of modern warfare. Sinclair stood before a massive holographic display, her brow furrowed in concentration as she analyzed the complex algorithms and quantum entanglement simulations flickering across the screen. The technology she and her team had developed was nothing short of revolutionary, a method of quantum linking that could allow soldiers to share their senses and coordinate their movements with superhuman precision. "We're on the verge of a whole new paradigm of warfare," Sinclair murmured, her eyes dancing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She knew the implications of her work were immense, both for good and for ill. In the wrong hands, this quantum technology could be a devastating force, capable of toppling governments and altering the balance of global power. A series of sharp raps on the reinforced door interrupted her train of thought. Sinclair turned to see a high-ranking military officer stride into the lab, his uniform crisp and his expression unreadable. "Doctor, the Joint Chiefs are ready for your update." The officer's tone was curt, brooking no argument. Sinclair nodded, steeling herself for the task ahead. She gathered her notes and followed the officer down the sterile, dimly lit corridors, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. As they approached a heavily guarded door, Sinclair couldn't help but wonder if she was truly prepared for the scrutiny and pressure that came with leading such a classified and consequential project. The door slid open, and Sinclair found herself standing before an imposing panel of uniformed generals and admirals, their faces illuminated by the glow of various holographic displays. She took a deep breath and began her presentation, her voice calm and measured despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Gentlemen, the Quantum Entanglement Coordination System, or QECS, has made significant breakthroughs in the last quarter." Sinclair gestured to the holographic projections flickering to life around the room. "As you can see, we've achieved unprecedented levels of quantum coherence, allowing us to link individual soldiers at the subatomic level." The generals leaned forward, their eyes narrowing as they studied the data. One grizzled officer cleared his throat, his voice gruff and skeptical. "So you're telling me these quantum troopers, as you call them, will be able to anticipate each other's movements, share sensory input, and coordinate attacks with perfect precision?" He shook his head, his expression doubtful. "Forgive me, Doctor, but this sounds like something out of a science fiction novel." Sinclair squared her shoulders, undaunted by the officer's skepticism. "I assure you, General, this is very much real. Our initial field tests have been nothing short of astounding." She gestured to the holographic displays, which now showed footage of soldiers moving in perfect synchrony, their aim deadly accurate and their reactions lightning fast. "With QECS, we can create an elite fighting force that is virtually unstoppable." The generals murmured to one another, their expressions a mix of awe and concern. Sinclair could feel the weight of their scrutiny, knew that the fate of her project, and perhaps the future of warfare itself, hung in the balance. "And the ethical implications, Doctor?" Another officer interjected, his brow furrowed. "Surely you must have considered the potential for abuse, the risks of this technology falling into the wrong hands." Sinclair drew in a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. "I assure you, gentlemen, that I have given this matter a great deal of thought. QECS is a delicate and powerful tool, one that must be wielded with the utmost care and responsibility." She paused, her eyes sweeping across the panel. "But in the right hands, it could be the key to securing our nation's future and perhaps even ushering in a new era of global peace." The room fell silent, the generals exchanging uneasy glances. Sinclair could feel the weight of their decision bearing down on her, but she refused to back down. This quantum technology was her life's work, and she was determined to see it used for the greater good, no matter the personal cost. After what felt like an eternity, the lead general leaned back in his chair, a contemplative expression on his face. "Very well, Doctor. You have our attention. Now, tell us more about these quantum troopers of yours." In the weeks that followed her briefing before the Joint Chiefs, Dr. Emily Sinclair found herself the center of a whirlwind of activity. The military had thrown its full weight behind the development of the Quantum Entanglement Coordination System, QECS, pouring endless resources into Sinclair's research and fast-tracking the creation of the first Quantum Troopers unit. Sinclair had mixed feelings about the rapid progress. On one hand, she was exhilarated by the breakthroughs her team was making, pushing the boundaries of what she had once thought possible. The quantum-linked soldiers were capable of feats that defied the limits of normal human physiology. Their senses heightened, their reflexes lightning fast, their movements seamlessly coordinated. Yet Sinclair couldn't shake the nagging sense of unease that had taken root in the pit of her stomach. She had envisioned QECS as a tool for defense, a means of protecting lives and promoting peace, but the military's voracious appetite for ever more powerful applications of the technology filled her with a deep sense of foreboding. One evening, as Sinclair pored over the latest reports from the field testing, she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she found herself face to face with General Wallace, the gruff, no-nonsense officer who had presided over her initial presentation. "Doctor," a word. The general's tone was clipped, his expression unreadable. Sinclair nodded, steeling herself for what was surely another round of intense scrutiny and questioning. She followed the general to a secluded corner of the lab, bracing herself for the worst. "I'll get right to the point, Sinclair," the general said, his brow furrowed. "Your QECS technology has exceeded all of our expectations. The quantum troopers are performing beyond anything we could have imagined." Sinclair felt a mix of pride and trepidation. "I'm pleased to hear that, General. But I assume there's more you'd like to discuss." The general nodded grimly. "You're right. The Joint Chiefs have decided to fast-track the full implementation of the Quantum Trooper program. We can't afford to let this technology stagnate, not when our adversaries are no doubt working on their own breakthroughs." Sinclair's heart sank. "General, I must express my concerns about the ethical implications of this decision. QECS is a delicate and powerful tool, one that I believe should be used judiciously, and only for defensive purposes." The general held up a hand, silencing her. "I understand your reservations, Doctor. Believe me, we've had lengthy debates about this very issue. But the fact remains that this technology gives us an unprecedented strategic advantage. We can't afford to let that slip through our fingers." Sinclair felt a surge of frustration. "But General, if this technology falls into the wrong hands, the consequences could be catastrophic. We have a responsibility to—" "Enough, Doctor." The general's voice was sharp, brooking no argument. "The decision has been made. Your job is to continue your research and provide us with the tools we need to protect this nation. Leave the ethics to us." Sinclair opened her mouth to protest, but the general had already turned and was striding away, his posture rigid with authority. Defeated, Sinclair sank back into her chair, a heavy weight settling in the pit of her stomach. In the days that followed, Sinclair watched with a growing sense of alarm as the military poured ever more resources into the Quantum Trooper program. Soldiers underwent intensive training, mastering the art of using their quantum-linked abilities in combat scenarios. Sinclair was forced to oversee the development of increasingly lethal applications of QECS, her protests falling on deaf ears. As she lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, Sinclair couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she had created a monster, one that was rapidly spiraling out of her control. The low hum of the quantum entanglement generators permeated the air, a constant reminder of the revolutionary technology that pulsed through the heart of the classified research facility. For Dr. Emily Sinclair, the sound had once been a source of excitement and possibility. Now, it was a constant source of unease, a persistent echo of the ethical quandary she found herself trapped in. Despite her protests, The military had forged ahead with the Quantum Trooper program, pouring ever more resources into Sinclair's research. The latest developments had been nothing short of staggering. Soldiers imbued with superhuman reflexes, heightened senses, and the ability to coordinate their movements with uncanny precision. Sinclair had watched with a growing sense of dread as her creation had been transformed into a devastating weapon of war. Yet even as the military marched forward, Sinclair could not escape the gnawing feeling that she had created something that was spiraling dangerously out of control. The quantum technology she had developed was a double-edged sword, a power that could be used to protect and defend, but also to subjugate and destroy. Sinclair's brooding thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the blaring of the facility's alarms. Startled, she looked up to see technicians rushing to their stations, their faces etched with a mix of fear and determination. "What's happening?" Sinclair demanded, her heart pounding. "We've got a security breach, Doctor," one of the technicians shouted, his fingers flying across the holographic control panels. "Unidentified infiltrators have breached the perimeter and are making their way towards the central hub." Sinclair felt a chill run down her spine. She knew all too well the value that her quantum technology held, both for her own country and for its adversaries. The thought of it falling into the wrong hands was a nightmare scenario she had long dreaded. "Activate the security protocols," Sinclair ordered, her voice sharp with urgency. "Seal off the central hub and scramble the quantum troopers." The technicians sprang into action, their fingers a blur as they initiated a series of countermeasures. Sinclair turned her attention to the holographic displays, her eyes scanning the facility schematics for any sign of the intruders. Suddenly, a flurry of movement on one of the screens caught her eye. Sinclair's breath caught in her throat as she watched a team of highly trained operatives swiftly and silently making their way towards the central hub, their movements eerily coordinated. "They've breached the inner perimeter," one of the technicians shouted. "The quantum troopers are en route, but they may not make it in time." Sinclair's mind raced, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. She knew that if the infiltrators reached the central hub, they would gain access to the HFY technology, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Without hesitation, Sinclair turned and sprinted towards the armory, her lab coat billowing behind her. She had never fired a weapon in her life, but in this moment, she knew that she had no choice. The fate of her creation, and perhaps the entire nation, hung in the balance. Bursting into the armory, Sinclair grabbed one of the high-tech assault rifles and checked the magazine, her hand shaking slightly. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, then turned and raced back towards the central hub, her weapon at the ready. As Sinclair approached the reinforced doors, she could hear the sounds of gunfire echoing through the corridors. Steeling herself, she pushed through the doors, her eyes sweeping the chaos of the scene that unfolded before her. The quantum troopers were locked in a fierce, lightning-fast battle with the intruders, their movements a blur as they dodged and weaved, trading blows with uncanny precision. Sinclair watched in awe, her finger hovering over the trigger, as the soldiers unleashed the full power of their quantum-linked abilities. But even as the troopers fought with superhuman ferocity, Sinclair could see that they were outnumbered and outmatched. The infiltrators, clad in black tactical gear and wielding advanced weaponry, were driven and relentless in their pursuit of the HFY's technology. Sinclair knew that she had to act, that she couldn't stand by and watch as her life's work was stolen. Taking a deep breath, she steadied her aim and opened fire, the weapon bucking in her hands as she let loose a hail of bullets. The battle raged on, the air thick with the sound of gunfire and the smell of ozone. Sinclair fought with a desperation born of her love for her creation and her fear of what it might become in the wrong hands. She was determined to protect the HFY's technology, no matter the cost. As the chaos around her threatened to overwhelm her, Sinclair couldn't help but wonder if she had truly created a monster, and whether she would be the one to ultimately slay it. In the aftermath of the harrowing attack on the research facility, a somber silence had fallen over the halls and corridors. Dr. Emily Sinclair walked through the dimly lit hallways, her steps heavy with a profound sense of unease. The quantum troopers had fought with a ferocity and coordination that had left the infiltrators reeling. Sinclair had watched in awe as the soldiers, their movements perfectly synchronized, had repelled the enemy assault with startling efficiency. It was a display of power that had both thrilled and terrified her. As Sinclair made her way to the command center, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted. The military's response to the infiltration had been swift and decisive. The Quantum Trooper program was now being fast-tracked with even greater urgency, with Sinclair's research being funneled into an intensive training regimen for an elite, specialized unit. Sinclair's protests had fallen on deaf ears. The generals and admirals who oversaw the project were now more convinced than ever of the quantum technology's strategic value. They saw the troopers as the key to securing a decisive military advantage, a force that could tip the scales of any conflict in their favor. But Sinclair knew the true cost of such power. She had witnessed firsthand the devastating potential of the QEC's system, the way it could transform ordinary soldiers into near unstoppable killing machines. The thought of such force being unleashed on the world filled her with a deep sense of dread. As Sinclair entered the command center, she found General Wallace waiting for her, his expression unreadable. "Doctor, the Joint Chiefs have convened a special session to discuss the future of the Quantum Trooper program," he said, his voice gruff. "They're impressed by the results of the recent engagement and want to fast-track the deployment of these super soldiers as soon as possible." Sinclair felt a lump form in her throat. "General, I must express my concerns once again. This technology is far too powerful to be used so recklessly. The ethical implications." Wallace raised a hand, silencing her. "I understand your reservations, Doctor, but the fact remains that the quantum troopers gave us the edge we needed to repel that infiltration. The security of this country depends on our ability to leverage every advantage we have." Sinclair shook her head, her frustration mounting. "General, you're missing the point. This technology is a double-edged sword. It can be used to protect, but also to subjugate and destroy. I fear that if we continue down this path, we'll be creating a force that is beyond our control." Wallace's expression hardened. "That's where you're wrong, Doctor. With the proper training and oversight, the quantum troopers will be the most disciplined, the most lethal, and the most reliable soldiers this country has ever seen. They'll be the key to winning any conflict, no matter the odds." Sinclair opened her mouth to protest, but the general cut her off. "The decision has been made, Sinclair. The Quantum Trooper program is moving forward, with or without your approval. Your job is to provide us with the tools we need to make it a success." Sinclair stared at the general, her mind reeling. She knew that there was no reasoning with him, no way to make him understand the gravity of what they were doing. The military had made its choice, and Sinclair knew that she was powerless to stop it. As the general turned and strode away, Sinclair felt a deep sense of resignation settle over her. She knew that she had to find a way to mitigate the damage, to find a way to ensure that her creation was not used for the wrong purposes. But the task felt overwhelming, and she couldn't help but wonder if she had truly created a monster that was beyond her control. Steeling herself, Sinclair made her way to the training facility, where the first batch of quantum troopers were undergoing their initial drills. As she watched the soldiers move with a precision and grace that defied the laws of human physics, she felt a swell of both pride and dread. Sinclair knew that she had to find a way to harness the power of the QEC's technology for good, to ensure that it was used to protect and defend, rather than to subjugate and destroy. But the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty, and Sinclair couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing a dangerous game, one that could have devastating consequences for the world. The air crackled with tension as the quantum troopers descended upon their target, a heavily fortified bunker belonging to a rogue nation suspected of developing a devastating new weapon. Dr. Emily Sinclair watched the unfolding operation from the command center, her heart pounding in her chest. After months of intensive training and preparation, the quantum troopers were finally being deployed on their first major mission. Sinclair had protested vehemently, pleading with the military brass to reconsider the use of her creation as an instrument of war. But her pleas had fallen on deaf ears, and now she could only watch helplessly as the troopers carried out their orders. As the holographic displays flickered with real-time surveillance footage, Sinclair found herself captivated by the sheer power and precision of the quantum-linked soldiers. Their movements were a blur, their reactions lightning-fast, as they breached the enemy defenses with ruthless efficiency. Sinclair could scarcely believe that these were the same men and women she had once trained, their abilities now elevated to the realm of the superhuman. General Wallace stood beside her, his expression inscrutable as he observed the operation unfold. "Impressive, isn't it, Doctor?" he murmured, his gaze never leaving the screens. "Your quantum technology is proving its worth on the battlefield." Sinclair felt a lump form in her throat. "General, I can't condone this. The quantum troopers are being used as weapons of war, not tools for defense and protection." Wallace turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "This is war, Sinclair. There's no room for idealism or half measures. The quantum troopers are the key to securing victory and ensuring the safety of our nation." Sinclair shook her head, her resolve hardening. "There's a difference between defense and conquest, General. This technology was meant to save lives, not take them." The general's expression darkened. "And that's where you're wrong, Doctor. The quantum troopers are the new face of modern warfare. With them, we can strike swiftly, decisively, and with minimal casualties on our side." Sinclair opened her mouth to protest, but the sudden flurry of activity on the displays silenced her. The quantum troopers had reached the heart of the enemy bunker, and the battle had erupted into a frenzied clash of technology and human will. Sinclair watched in horror as the troopers unleashed the full power of their quantum-linked abilities, their movements a blur as they dodged enemy fire and converged on their targets. The sound of gunfire and the ominous rumble of explosions filled the air, and Sinclair found herself gripping the edge of the console, her knuckles turning white. As the battle raged on, Sinclair could feel the weight of her conscience bearing down upon her. She had created this technology, this force that was now being wielded with such devastating effect. And in that moment, she knew that she had to find a way to stop it, to find a way to reclaim her creation, and use it for its intended purpose. With renewed determination, Sinclair turned to the general, her eyes blazing with a fierce resolve. "General, I need to speak with the quantum troopers. I have to try and convince them to stand down." Wallace stared at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and disdain. "Absolutely not, Sinclair. These men and women are under my command, and they will carry out their orders to the letter." Sinclair refused to back down. "General, please. You have to understand. This technology was never meant to be used this way. I created it to protect, not to destroy. Let me try to reason with them, to show them a better way." The general's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Sinclair thought he would refuse. But then, something in his expression shifted, and he gave a curt nod. "You have 5 minutes, Sinclair. Make them count." Sinclair didn't wait for him to change his mind. She turned and raced towards the communications hub, her mind racing with a desperate plan. If she could just reach the quantum troopers, if she could show them the true power of their abilities, maybe, just maybe, she could stop this madness before it was too late. As she reached the hub and began to establish the link, Sinclair felt a surge of hope. This was her last chance to reclaim her creation, to ensure that it was used for the greater good. With a deep breath, she steeled herself for the confrontation to come, determined to do whatever it took to save the quantum troopers and the world from the terrifying power she had unleashed. The dim glow of the holographic displays cast an eerie light over the command center as Dr. Emily Sinclair pored over the latest intel. The quantum troopers' mission had been a resounding success, their devastating display of power effectively neutralizing the enemy's WMD capabilities. But for Sinclair, the victory felt hollow, a bitter taste in her mouth. She had pleaded with the troopers, risking the wrath of the military brass, to stand down and reconsider the use of their quantum-linked abilities. But her words had fallen on deaf ears, the soldiers' loyalty to their orders unwavering. Sinclair had watched in horror as they had unleashed the full force of the HFY's technology, raining destruction upon the enemy with surgical precision. Now, as the dust settled, Sinclair found herself consumed by a growing sense of guilt and betrayal. She had created this technology, this power, and she had allowed it to be twisted and corrupted, used as a weapon of war rather than a tool for defense and protection. Sinclair knew that she had to find a way to regain control, to somehow limit the military's use of the quantum troopers and steer them back towards their original purpose. But the task seemed increasingly daunting, with the brass more determined than ever to leverage the technology's strategic advantages. As Sinclair pored over the mission reports, her mind raced with ideas. She knew that she couldn't simply destroy the HFY system. The technology was too valuable, too important to the future of warfare. But perhaps she could find a way to subvert it, to unlock its full potential for peaceful applications while limiting its use as a weapon. Sinclair's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Turning, she found herself face to face with General Wallace, his expression unreadable. "Doctor," a word, he said, his voice clipped. Sinclair steeled herself, unsure of what to expect. "Of course, General. What can I do for you?" Wallace's gaze narrowed. "I've been reviewing the mission reports, and I couldn't help but notice some irregularities in your communications with the quantum troopers during the operation." Sinclair felt a chill run down her spine. "I'm not sure I understand, General. I was simply trying to reason with them, to show them a better way to use their abilities." The General's jaw tightened. "That's exactly the problem, Sinclair. Your little pep talk nearly compromised the entire mission. The quantum troopers are soldiers, not philosophers. Their job is to follow orders, not question them." Sinclair felt a surge of indignation. "General, these are not mindless drones. They're human beings with the power to make their own choices. I was trying to appeal to their sense of morality, to show them that there's more to this technology than just." "Enough." Wallace cut her off, his voice rising. "Your personal views on the ethical use of this technology are irrelevant, Sinclair. The quantum troopers are a vital asset, and I won't have you undermining their effectiveness." Sinclair stared at him, her mind racing. She knew that she was treading on dangerous ground, that her actions could be seen as an act of insubordination or even treason. But she couldn't bring herself to back down, not when the stakes were so high. "General, I understand your concerns, but I can't in good conscience continue to develop this technology if it's going to be used solely as a weapon of war. There has to be a way to." "I'm sorry, Doctor, but that's not an option." Wallace's voice was cold, his expression unyielding. "The quantum troopers are here to stay, and your role in this project is to ensure their continued effectiveness, not to question it." Sinclair felt her heart sink. She knew that she was running out of time, that the military's grip on the HFY's technology was only tightening. If she didn't act soon, she might lose her chance to steer it back towards its original purpose. "General, please, you have to listen to me. This technology is too powerful to be used so recklessly. If it falls into the wrong hands, the consequences could be—" "Sinclair, you're treading on very thin ice." Wallace's voice was laced with warning. "I suggest you focus on your work and leave the strategy to those of us who understand the realities of warfare." With that, the General turned and strode away, leaving Sinclair alone with her thoughts. She knew that she had to act, that she couldn't sit idly by and watch as the HFY's technology was used to devastating effect. But the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty, and Sinclair couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was playing a dangerous game, one that could cost her everything. As she stared at the holographic displays, Sinclair's resolve hardened. She would find a way to reclaim her creation, to use it for the greater good, even if it meant risking her own future. The shadows stretched long in the dimly lit corridors as Dr. Emily Sinclair hurried through the classified research facility, her mind racing with a desperate plan. After her confrontation with General Wallace, she knew that her time was running out. The military's grip on the quantum troopers and the HFY technology was tightening, and she could no longer sit idly by and watch as her creation was twisted and corrupted. Sinclair's footsteps echoed as she made her way to the secure server room, her fingers flying across the holographic control panels. She knew that the risks were immense. If she were caught, the consequences could be devastating. But the stakes were too high to do nothing. Carefully, Sinclair began to implement a series of countermeasures, her eyes narrowed in concentration. She had to find a way to liberate the quantum troopers from the military's control, to unlock the full potential of the HFY technology and steer it towards the greater good. As Sinclair worked, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led her to this moment. The quantum troopers had been her creation, her life's work, a revolutionary technology that had the power to change the face of modern warfare. But somewhere along the way, the military had seized control, twisting and perverting her creation into a devastating weapon. Sinclair's jaw tightened with determination. She refused to let that happen, no matter the cost. Suddenly, the alarm blared, and Sinclair's heart leaped into her throat. Whirling around, she found herself face to face with a team of armed soldiers, their weapons trained on her. "Dr. Sinclair, you're under arrest," the lead soldier barked, his voice cold and unyielding. Sinclair raised her hands in a gesture of surrender, her mind racing. "I can explain," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I was just making some routine maintenance updates to the system." The soldier's expression remained impassive. "That's not what it looks like from our end, ma'am. You're coming with us." Sinclair's mind whirled as the soldiers surrounded her, their weapons never wavering. She knew that she had to buy time, to find a way to reach the quantum troopers and convince them to join her cause. "Please, you have to listen to me," she pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation. "The quantum troopers, they're being used as instruments of war, not tools for protection and defense. I can show you a better way, a way to use this technology to save lives, not take them." The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances, their grip on their weapons tightening. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have our orders," the lead soldier said, his voice gruff. "You're coming with us, one way or another." Sinclair's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to act, and she had to act quickly. Steeling herself, she turned and sprinted down the corridor, her lab coat billowing behind her. The soldiers opened fire, their weapons cutting through the air with a deafening roar. Sinclair dodged and weaved, her mind focused on a single goal, reaching the quantum troopers and convincing them to join her cause. As she raced through the winding corridors, Sinclair could hear the sounds of the pursuit growing ever closer. She knew that she was running out of time, that the military would stop at nothing to recapture her. But Sinclair refused to give up. She had come too far, sacrificed too much, to let the quantum troopers be used as instruments of destruction. With a renewed sense of purpose, she pushed on, her mind racing with a desperate plan. Finally, Sinclair reached the training facility, where the quantum troopers were gathered, their expressions a mix of confusion and alarm. "Listen to me," Sinclair cried, her voice hoarse with exertion. "The military has corrupted your abilities, twisted them into a weapon of war. But I can show you a better way, a way to use this technology to protect and defend, not to destroy." The troopers exchanged uneasy glances, their hands twitching towards their weapons. "Dr. Sinclair, you're under arrest," a familiar voice boomed. Sinclair whirled around to see General Wallace striding towards her, his expression grim. "General, please, you have to listen to me," Sinclair pleaded, her desperation palpable. "The quantum troopers, they're more than just soldiers. They're the key to a new era of peace and progress. But you're using them as tools of subjugation. and I can't let that happen." Wallace's jaw tightened. "You've gone too far, Sinclair. This technology belongs to the military, and we will use it as we see fit. Now, stand down, or we'll be forced to take you down." Sinclair's eyes darted towards the quantum troopers, her mind racing. She knew that this was her last chance, her final opportunity to reclaim her creation and steer it towards a better future. With a deep breath, she turned to the troopers, her gaze unwavering. "Soldiers, the choice is yours," she said, her voice clear and resolute. "Will you stand with me and fight for a future where your abilities are used to protect and defend, not to destroy?" The tension in the air was palpable as the quantum troopers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of uncertainty and awe. Sinclair held her breath, praying that her words had struck a chord, that they would see the truth in her vision. And then, one by one, the troopers stepped forward, their weapons lowered, their faces set with determination. "We'll stand with you, Dr. Sinclair," a young soldier said, his voice steady. "This technology is ours, and we'll use it as we see fit." Sinclair felt a surge of hope, even as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the facility. The battle for the quantum troopers' future had only just begun. The air crackled with tension as Dr. Emily Sinclair and the quantum troopers faced off against the military forces that had gathered in the training facility. General Wallace's expression was a mask of fury. His eyes narrowed as he stared down the defiant soldiers. "Stand down, all of you," he growled, his voice laced with menace. "This is an act of treason, and you will be court-martialed for your insubordination." Sinclair stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "General, this technology was never meant to be used as a weapon of war. The quantum troopers are more than just soldiers. They have the power to change the world, to bring about a new era of peace and progress." Wallace's jaw tightened. "You've gone too far, Sinclair. This technology belongs to the military, and we will use it as we see fit. Now, surrender and come with us, or we'll be forced to take you down." Sinclair felt a surge of determination. "I won't let you do this, General. The quantum troopers have a choice, and they've chosen to stand with me. We're going to show the world a better way to use this technology, one that doesn't involve destruction and subjugation." The quantum troopers shifted, their expressions resolute. Sinclair knew that they were risking everything to defy the military's orders, but she also knew that they had seen the true potential of the QECS system, a potential that went far beyond the narrow confines of warfare. "You have no idea what you're up against, Sinclair," Wallace spat. "The power of the quantum troopers is unmatched, and we'll use it to crush anyone who dares to stand in our way." Sinclair took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. "Then bring it on, General, because we're not going down without a fight." The tension in the air was palpable as the two sides faced off, each side determined to assert its dominance. Sinclair knew that the odds were stacked against them, but she also knew that they had something the military could never truly possess, the unwavering conviction that they were fighting for a greater good. With a nod, Sinclair signaled to the quantum troopers, and the battle erupted. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the facility as the troopers unleashed the full power of their quantum-linked abilities, their movements a blur as they dodged and weaved, their aim deadly precise. Sinclair watched in awe as the troopers worked in perfect harmony, their senses heightened, their reactions lightning fast. They were more than just soldiers. They were artists of war, masters of their craft. But even as the troopers fought with a ferocity that left the military forces reeling, Sinclair knew that they were not fighting to destroy. Instead, they were fighting to liberate, to reclaim the power of the QECS technology and harness it for the greater good. As the battle raged on, Sinclair found herself drawn into the fray, her own skills put to the test as she worked to coordinate the troopers' movements and direct their efforts. She had never before considered herself a warrior, but in that moment, she felt a surge of power and purpose that she had never known. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the military forces began to falter, their ranks thinning as the quantum troopers pressed their advantage. Sinclair knew that the time had come to make their move, to seize control of the HFY's technology and use it to reshape the world. With a determined nod, she signaled to the troopers, and they surged forward, their movements fluid and precise. In a matter of minutes, they had neutralized the remaining opposition, and the facility was firmly under their control. Sinclair stood amidst the chaos, her chest heaving, her mind racing. She had done it. She had reclaimed her creation, and now the future was theirs to shape. As the quantum troopers gathered around her, their expressions a mix of pride and determination, Sinclair knew that they were on the cusp of something truly remarkable. With the power of the HFY's technology at their fingertips, they could usher in a new era of peace and progress, one that would reshape the world and transform the very nature of human society. "Well done, everyone," Sinclair said, her voice soft but ringing with conviction. "This is just the beginning. Now, let's get to work." And with that, she turned and strode forward, her steps measured and assured. The quantum troopers fell into step behind her, their eyes shining with a newfound sense of purpose. The battle for the future had been won, and the dawn of a new quantum era was upon them.